Millionaire left his ex for a younger woman. She crashed his wedding with a secret. Welcome to a story charged with heartbreak, secrets, and the electrifying sense that the past can never be fully buried. In today's drama, Millionaire left his ex for a younger woman. She crashed his wedding with a secret. We'll journey through a world of lavish living and expertly hidden agendas. Our protagonist believes he can purchase anything: status, power, even loyalty, until life delivers a reckoning on the very day meant to seal his perfect future. Expect unexpected twists, brimming tension, and a taste of immediate karma that makes it all the more riveting. So settle in and prepare yourself for a roller coaster of deception, redemption, and shocking revelations. Before we dive in, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. If you're excited about this story, let us know. If you enjoyed the video, press 1. If not, press O. Your feedback really inspires me to gather more uplifting and meaningful stories. Christopher Lancaster was a man accustomed to winning. At just 40 years old, he was already recognized as one of the city's most influential real estate magnates, known for having a Midas touch with properties both commercial and residential. Towering skyscrapers in New York bore his name, and glossy magazines clamored for exclusive interviews. He had houses around the globe, an Italian villa in Tuscany, a minimalist penthouse in Tokyo, and his prized home in Manhattan's Upper East Side. Life for Christopher, as he was fond of telling his inner circle, was a game of expansion and conquest. But behind his cool, polished exterior lay a restless spirit. He was never satisfied, always scanning for the next achievement. This insatiable drive spilled over into his personal life too. The moment a relationship no longer fit his carefully curated trajectory, he ended it abruptly, if necessary. So it was for his ex, Penelope Rhodes, a woman he had once described as the most supportive partner a man could ask for. She believed in him back when his empire was still a fledgling start-up with questionable investors. Their relationship had spanned 6 years, a period of building dreams and forging trust. Penelope had been with him when no one else cared about his plans to buy and renovate old hotels on the outskirts of cities. She had done more than stand by him. She had contributed ideas, moral support, and even some of her modest savings. Yet, Christopher ended it all when he met Juliana Winters, a bright-eyed 20-something whose social media following rivaled that of minor celebrities. Juliana was bold, fashionable, and exuded a youthful energy that Christopher found intoxicating. Although Penelope was only 5 years older than Juliana, Christopher's perspective twisted that difference into a cavernous gap. In his eyes, Juliana symbolized the fresh, modern chapter he was chasing. So, with little warning and minimal empathy, he informed Penelope. They were growing apart and moved on. Penelope was blindsided, left with heartbreak and lingering confusion. For Christopher, it felt like a strategic pivot. He had no intention of looking back. Within the year, Christopher and Juliana became the talk of high society. Their every outing, be it to exclusive galas or philanthropic dinners, made the tabloids. Paparazzi adored Juliana's flair for designer clothing, and Christopher's business acumen commanded awe. Soon, a swirling rumor took shape. Christopher was shopping for an engagement ring at Tiffany & Company. Indeed, not long afterward, the couple announced their upcoming wedding. It was set to be a grand affair at the Plaza Hotel in New York City, complete with a guest list of socialites, international investors, and A-list acquaintances. The news hammered Penelope's heart further, though she kept a low profile and refused to offer public comment. She was determined to let Christopher live with his choices until fate intervened. Despite appearances, Penelope was not as broken as Christopher might have assumed. In the months following their split, she began forging a new path for herself. She used to be a consultant in the hotel business, offering smaller chains advice on improving their brand image. When Christopher left, she took time to recover from the heartbreak, but soon discovered she had valuable experience gleaned from her years helping him with his projects. Gradually, she channeled that knowledge into launching her own boutique consultancy. While Christopher soared to new heights, Penelope found modest success, her reputation for thoroughness drawing in clients. Though she still nursed bitterness, she resolved never to stoop to revenge. She told herself there was no point in chasing a man who turned her heart into collateral damage. Yet everything changed when Penelope discovered, purely by accident, the secret that would upend Christopher's wedding. The details came to her through a series of coincidences: a manager at a property Christopher owned in Boston, a misdelivered package, and a casual remark from an employee who recognized Penelope's name from older business dealings. What Penelope stumbled across was more than a trifling skeleton in Christopher's closet. It was evidence that he had committed an act that could rock his entire empire. In a moment of clarity, Penelope realized the moral consequences if she stayed silent. She decided she needed to confront Christopher, if only to save others from potential fallout. A sense of indignation flared. Christopher's entire world was built on illusions, and he was about to tie the knot, further binding unsuspecting parties to his lies. For a week, Penelope wrestled with the question of timing. Should she reveal what she found before the wedding so he could address it quietly? Or should she wait until after, ensuring that Christopher bore the humiliation of his hidden misdeeds? The second option felt petty, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Christopher's entire brand was carefully choreographed. If she confronted him in private, he might bury the truth. She needed to ensure accountability. The final push came when she saw a flamboyant social media post from Juliana's bachelorette party. The caption read, "Counting down to #forever Lancaster." As if it were the merger of the year, something in Penelope snapped. She decided she wouldn't remain a silent footnote in Christopher's life. The truth, once unleashed, would handle the rest. The day of the wedding at the plaza arrived in a flurry of over-the-top fanfare. Juliana had spared no expense. The venue boasted thousands of fresh orchids, an 8-tier wedding cake flown in from Paris, and a guest list that included celebrities, influencers, and corporate bigwigs. Every table sparkled under chandeliers, each place setting featuring custom gold, embossed menus. The staff wore crisp uniforms, orchestrating every detail to perfection. Photographers buzzed around, capturing images of the bride's designer gown, an avant-garde piece that dazzled with intricate beading. Christopher woke that morning in a sumptuous suite, his tuxedo carefully laid out. This was to be his triumphant moment, marrying the glamorous Juliana in front of the city's elite. Everything had been meticulously planned. The business portion of Christopher's mind was satisfied. The wedding would reinforce his brand as a man of style and success, forging alliances with new power players. He double-checked his cufflinks, each sporting the Lancaster family crest. He gave a short nod to the reflection in the mirror, confident the day would unfold flawlessly. Meanwhile, Penelope arrived at the plaza quietly, wearing a simple but elegant dress, her hair styled in a modest chignon. She didn't want to stand out among the extravagance, but she also refused to appear cowed. She had no formal invitation, of course, but she had arranged for a short meeting with a mutual acquaintance who was attending a property developer who respected Penelope's business acumen enough to slip her in. Her plan was to time her appearance just when the ceremony concluded and the reception began, ensuring maximum attention on Christopher's reaction. The very notion made her tremble with nervous energy. As the ceremony time drew close, guests filled the opulent ballroom, taking seats in rows of gilded chairs. A hush of excitement hung in the air. Christopher appeared at the end of the aisle, standing tall in a custom tuxedo. He wore a self-assured smile, though beneath it a slight flicker of nerves. The music swelled, the double doors opened, and Juliana made her grand entrance. Cameras clicked in rapid succession, capturing the bride's radiant grin. She looked every bit the youthful princess, with a fitted bodice that flowed into a dramatic train. Gasps of admiration rippled among the attendees. The officiant began the formalities. Vows were exchanged, eloquent words about love, support, and eternal devotion. Christopher slid a ring onto Juliana's finger. She repeated the gesture, her eyes shining. To the audience, they appeared the picture of perfect unity. Applause erupted as the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, and the couple sealed it with a kiss that tabloids would later call the highlight of the social season. A shower of white petals fluttered overhead. It was, by all external measures, a flawless ceremony. When the official photographs wrapped up, the newlyweds and their guests transitioned to a lavish cocktail hour in an adjacent ballroom. Champagne flowed freely, and waiters passed around hors d'oeuvres that cost more per piece than an average meal. Socialites, influencers, and executives mingled, congratulating the couple. Christopher relaxed, savoring the victory of a seamless wedding. Juliana glowed under the attention, practically floating from well-wisher to well-wisher. Suddenly, through the large double doors leading to the cocktail hour, Penelope stepped in. Her posture was poised, her face calm yet purposeful. She scanned the crowd, searching for Christopher among the throngs. At first, no one recognized her. She wasn't part of the bride's circle, nor was she on the official guest list. But as she progressed further into the room, a few of Christopher's business associates who knew her from the past parted the way, uncertain how to react. Gasps and whispers began weaving through the crowd. Christopher's gaze fell upon Penelope. His confident grin faltered, replaced by a flash of disquiet. Instantly, he recognized the set of her jaw, that determined look that meant she wasn't there to offer mere congratulations. Juliana, noticing her husband's abrupt shift in demeanor, followed his line of sight. She saw a poised woman standing a few yards away, and she sensed the significance of Christopher's reaction. "Penelope?" Christopher asked, stepping forward warily. He hadn't uttered her name in many months, yet here it was, reverberating between them amidst the swirl of onlookers. Some guests drifted closer, drawn by the tension. Penelope offered a curt nod. "Christopher, congratulations on your big day." The undertone of her voice carried neither warmth nor open hostility. It was resolute, neutral. She glanced at Juliana, whose expression hardened with suspicion. Juliana slid an arm around Christopher's waist, as if to assert her place. "I don't believe we've met," she said, her voice cool. "Are you an old friend of Chris's?" She stressed the casual nickname for effect, ignoring that Christopher hated being called Chris by anyone but her. Penelope drew a measured breath. "I was his partner for 6 years." An audible rustle went through the crowd, many of whom recognized Christopher's previous relationship but had never met Penelope. The bride stiffened at the revelation. Christopher shot a glare at Penelope. "I don't recall inviting you," he stated, trying to maintain composure. "This is hardly the time or place to, really." Penelope cut in, her voice betraying a sliver of indignation, "because I think it's the exact time and place to reveal what I've learned. After all, you've just made a lifelong commitment, and everyone here should know who they're dealing with." Juliana's nails dug into Christopher's arm. "What is this about?" she hissed, glaring from Christopher to Penelope and back. Penelope scanned the curious, increasingly alarmed faces of the wedding guests. She cleared her throat, her heart pounding, yet she forced her voice to remain steady. "I apologize to all of you for causing a scene, but I believe it's necessary." Christopher has been concealing the fact that one of his core real estate deals, the one in Boston that catapulted his success, was based on fraudulent environmental reports and falsified permits. He knew that the property was on protected wetlands, and he bribed officials to push it through. An immediate hush fell, a silence so thick it felt suffocating. Penelope's words hung in the air, laced with the kind of scandal that could destroy reputations. People blinked, uncertain if they had truly heard what they thought they heard. Christopher's eyes flared with anger. "That's a lie," he spat, though his voice wavered slightly. He instinctively looked around to see if cameras were rolling. Indeed, a few cell phones were lifted discreetly, filming. Penelope held her ground. "I have the documentation, Chris. Emails from your back and forth with an environmental consultant who warned you of the risk. Bank transfer records that show undisclosed payments to key officials. And it's not just me who's seen them. A contact in the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection is already looking into it." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Several of Christopher's associates exchanged shocked glances. A hush of confusion, then outraged murmuring, rippled throughout the guests. People who'd invested money or trusted him began to question their involvement. Christopher's breathing grew ragged, his face drained of color. He had carefully shielded that skeleton in his closet for years. If it emerged into the light, it could trigger a series of lawsuits, not to mention criminal investigations. Juliana, in her lace-laden wedding gown, stared at her new husband in disbelief. "You told me everything about your success was above board," she hissed, lowering her voice though half the guests could likely hear. "Did you lie to me?" Christopher struggled to regain control. He turned on Penelope with ferocity. "You're just bitter that I left you," he said, forcing a mocking laugh. "You invented some scandal to sabotage my wedding." Penelope's eyes glinted with tears. She fought to hold back. "I wish that were true. I never wanted revenge, Christopher. But if these wetlands were illegally developed, you jeopardized ecosystems and disregarded the law. People have a right to know how your so-called empire was built." An older man in a sharp suit, one of Christopher's long-time business partners, stepped forward. His voice crackled with tension. "Chris, can you assure us there's no truth to these allegations?" Christopher's jaw tightened. "Of course I can," but there was a flicker of panic in his eyes, transparent to anyone paying attention. He might have tried spinning the story, had immediate karma not chosen that precise moment to strike with crushing effect. Through the grand doors, a uniformed courier from a local law firm, hired to deliver urgent documents, arrived, scanning the crowd for Christopher. The man waved a small packet. "Mr. Lancaster?" he called. All heads turned. Christopher stepped forward, half dazed. The courier placed the envelope in his hand and left without ceremony. Christopher opened it, skimming the first lines, his expression contorted. Summons. A legal notice that he was under investigation for improper land development in Massachusetts and might be compelled to appear in court. Some of the wedding guests pressed closer to glimpse the letter. Christopher's knuckles whitened as he gripped the document. A wave of gasps and hushed commentary erupted. Cameras flashed as people took pictures of Christopher standing there, wedding finery and all, holding a summons that spelled the potential collapse of his empire. Immediate karma, indeed. He found himself on the brink of ruin, humiliated in front of the city's elite, just moments after exchanging vows with his trophy wife. Juliana ripped her hand from his. "You lied," she whispered. "I married a liar. Did you seriously think you could hide something like this?" Her eyes brimmed with tears of rage and betrayal. Christopher spun to confront Penelope, who stood quietly, shoulders tense. "You did this," he growled, fury blazing in his eyes. Penelope shook her head. "You did it to yourself. I didn't forge those documents or bribe those officials. He lunged forward as if to snatch the damning papers from her. A few onlookers, including a security guard for the event, intercepted him. The guard locked an arm around Christopher's bicep. "Calm down, sir," he said firmly, worried the confrontation would spiral into violence. For a long moment, Christopher's entire being shook with anger and dread. He felt the stares of every guest, each one judging him. The unassailable fortress he'd built on illusions was suddenly collapsing in real time. The irony of it all on his wedding day no less burned into his core. Juliana, looking at him with disgust, turned and fled, her train snaking behind her in a swirl of lace and heartbreak. A pack of stunned bridesmaids rushed after her, forming a protective cluster. Guests began to trickle away, some horrified, some gleefully texting and calling about the scandal. The business partners who had once toasted Christopher's brilliance now slipped into corners, calling their lawyers, murmuring about damage control. The wedding that was supposed to mark the pinnacle of Christopher's success had devolved into a public exposure of his unscrupulous methods. Penelope, feeling a swirl of conflicting emotions, sadness, triumph, and exhaustion, stepped back. She had done what she came to do. Part of her regretted the spectacle, but she reminded herself that Christopher's actions had far-reaching consequences beyond just personal betrayal. She felt a gentle hand on her shoulder and turned to see an old acquaintance who had once championed her business ideas. He offered a nod of understanding. As Christopher stood in the midst of the storm, holding the summons, guests scattering, he experienced a wave of terror that overshadowed even his anger. He realized that not only was his wedding day in shambles, but his entire fortune, his name, his brand faced immediate jeopardy. A cold sweat broke out across his forehead. He tried to follow Juliana, desperate to salvage some remnant of their day, but she had already locked herself in a separate room with her friends, refusing to see him. Everywhere he turned, he met eyes full of judgment and curiosity. Reporters, sensing a big story, had begun infiltrating the edges of the reception, cameras at the ready. He was cornered, vulnerable. Just a half-hour earlier, Christopher had been on top of the world. Now, the veneer of success was cracked, exposing the raw, ugly truth beneath. And it had all come crumbling down the moment his ex-fiancée strode in to speak her piece. Unable to salvage the moment, Christopher stormed out of the ballroom, ripping off his jacket in frustration. A small cluster of associates followed him to a private suite upstairs, hoping to calm him down. He slammed the door once inside, leaning against the wall, breath labored. "Penelope is lying," he muttered, though deep down he recognized her sincerity. She had never been vindictive or reckless with accusations. She must have faked those documents. Even as he spoke, he knew how hollow his defense sounded. One of his more loyal confidants hesitated. "Chris, if there's even a sliver of truth to this, you need a legal team now. And you need to come clean to your investors." A moment later, that confidant's phone buzzed. He stepped aside to take the call, probably a concerned partner. Christopher sagged onto a velvet couch, head in his hands. In the hallway, word traveled that Juliana had packed her personal belongings from the bridal suite. She was leaving. The staff whispered that she had demanded an annulment, furious she'd been implicated in what might turn into a massive legal scandal. She felt humiliated, used for show. Some of her bridesmaids were discreetly ordering cars, determined to whisk her away from the fiasco. The dream wedding was, in every sense, over. Over the next few days, the tabloids erupted with news. Billionaire's wedding shattered by fraud allegations, new bride flees as shocking documents surface, and more. Photographs of Christopher, open summons in hand, circulated across social media. He tried to issue a press statement denying Penelope's claims, but the Massachusetts investigation quickly gained momentum. Officials confirmed they were looking into wrongdoing on the Boston wetlands development. A search for bribery evidence was underway, leading to the rumored arrests of minor officials. Lawsuits loomed from environmental groups outraged at the destruction of protected land. Christopher's entire career hung in the balance. Juliana, true to her impulsive personality, posted a social media video proclaiming her innocence. In tears, she explained she knew nothing of the allegations. She garnered sympathy from her followers, many of whom turned their anger on Christopher. Her father, a well-connected industrialist, threatened to use his influence to ensure Christopher was held accountable. Sponsors pulled out of Christopher's upcoming developments. Investors withdrew from deals. Stock in his real estate venture dropped precipitously. Within a fortnight, Christopher Lancaster faced the unthinkable. His empire was teetering near collapse, and there was no easy fix. And Penelope, she found herself hounded by reporters, some praising her as a whistleblower, others painting her as a vengeful ex. She refused to give extended interviews, only releasing a measured statement. "I uncovered wrongdoing that needed exposure. My hope is that justice will be done in accordance with the law." After that, she retreated to her consulting work, turning down lucrative offers to dish more dirt. She wanted no part of the media circus. Still, Christopher's downfall weighed on her conscience. Though she believed in what she had done, she also recognized the personal toll. Despite everything, she had once loved him. She couldn't simply rejoice in his ruin, especially knowing how cunning he could be at spinning narratives. If he found a way to manipulate the investigation, he might slip free, albeit with a tarnished image. But from everything Penelope had seen, it looked like he would finally be forced to face consequences that money and charm couldn't quell. One afternoon, several weeks after the wedding debacle, Penelope received an unexpected call from Christopher's personal assistant. The assistant, sounding harried, asked if Penelope could meet Christopher at a small cafe in Midtown somewhere away from paparazzi eyes. Initially, Penelope considered refusing, but curiosity and a lingering sense of closure prompted her to agree. They met on a Wednesday morning, the cafe nearly empty except for a few patrons. Christopher arrived wearing a plain suit, looking drained and thinner than Penelope remembered. The usual self-assured spark in his eyes was nowhere to be found. He offered a quick nod in greeting before sitting across from her. "I won't waste your time," he began, voice subdued. "I wanted to apologize and to understand why you did this now." Penelope steadied herself. "Christopher, you left me for Juliana, and that hurt. But I let it be. What I couldn't let go of was your disregard for the law and environment. You hid your wrongdoing, and people are suffering the consequences. Or did you think wetlands were just worthless swamps?" He sighed, massaging the bridge of his nose. "I knew it was risky, but the opportunity was massive. The property tripled in value once developed." After a pause, he added quietly, "It was a mistake." "That's a mild word for bribery," Penelope countered. "I tried approaching you before the wedding. You ignored me. Had you listened, I might have handled it differently. But you forced my hand." Christopher chewed his lip. He seemed about to lash out, but then slumped. "You have no idea how badly this has destroyed me. Investors, friends, everyone's deserted me. Juliana's filing for an annulment. The board of my own company is talking about removing me as CEO." He locked eyes with her. "You're satisfied?" Penelope's heart tightened. She never sought a vendetta, only accountability. "I'm not satisfied," she said quietly, "but I am relieved that the truth won't remain buried. You built an empire by cutting corners and ignoring moral lines. Now, you face the consequences. Maybe you can learn something from it." He lowered his gaze, picking invisible lint from his jacket. "I'm going to fight the legal charges. My lawyers say I might negotiate a settlement to avoid jail time. But either way, the damage is done." His voice wavered, and for a moment, Penelope caught a glimpse of the vulnerable man beneath the layered arrogance, someone genuinely afraid. "I'm sorry I left you the way I did," he muttered. It was cruel. Penelope's eyes softened. She recalled the heartbreak, the sleepless nights, the unanswered questions that consumed her for so long. "It was," she said, "but it's behind us now." They spoke a little longer, in halting sentences. Then Christopher said goodbye and left, leaving Penelope with a swirl of emotions that she couldn't quite pass. She felt pity for him, but also acceptance that she had done the right thing, even if it was painful. She paid for her coffee and rose to go, exhaling a tension that had sat on her chest for far too long. In the weeks that followed, the investigation deepened. Evidence of corruption surfaced from multiple angles, implicating Christopher and a network of local officials who took bribes to sign off on questionable permits. The media devoured every twist. Some high-level civil servants resigned to avoid the brunt of the scandal, while Christopher's attorneys maneuvered to keep him from indictment. The cost of those maneuvers was astronomical, draining his personal coffers. Yet, ironically, Penelope's consultancy business began to flourish. Clients appreciated her integrity. She landed new projects, received calls from organizations wanting her perspective on ethical land development. Though she never courted the limelight, her name became associated with honesty and diligence. It was a bittersweet victory, overshadowed by the heartbreak and drama that had led her here. Months later, a final blow fell. A court hearing determined that Christopher's company had indeed violated environmental laws and engaged in fraudulent activities. Heavy fines were levied. Multiple lawsuits lingered on the horizon. In a swift move, the company's board replaced Christopher as CEO, anxious to distance themselves from his tarnished name. The man who once flaunted unstoppable ambition now faced professional exile. The social circles that once embraced him now regarded him as a pariah. News outlets reported that Juliana was seen traveling the Mediterranean with friends, forging a new life free from the scandal. She never spoke publicly about Christopher again, except to confirm they were legally separated. Christopher, for his part, retreated from public view, selling off properties to pay legal costs. He was last spotted by paparazzi, leaving a modest Manhattan apartment building, far from the luxurious penthouse he'd once called home. As for Penelope, life moved forward at a steadier, more grounded pace. She took solace in the fact that she had stood up for truth, even at the risk of exposing herself to public scrutiny. When she read that Christopher would likely avoid prison in favor of a plea deal and intense financial penalties, she felt a mix of relief that no further damage would be done and a lingering sadness at how far he had fallen. But there was no going back. Some stories end with a quiet acceptance. In the end, Christopher Lancaster's wedding, which was supposed to seal his ascension to the apex of wealth and status, became the pivotal moment of his downfall. The immediate karma he suffered, public disgrace, legal peril, and the loss of his new bride could not be undone by any amount of money or public relations spin. And while Penelope never considered herself the agent of his ruin, she recognized that truth has a way of surfacing when it's most needed, no matter how carefully one tries to bury it. Thank you for following this gripping tale of ambition, heartbreak, and revelations that refuse to stay hidden. We watched Christopher's carefully curated world collapse in the face of undeniable evidence, proving once again that the past can return with a vengeance, especially when it's bound up in deceit. With her unwavering moral compass, Penelope stepped into a lion's den, shining a light on wrongdoings that threatened others far beyond herself. If you found this story compelling, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more riveting stories like this one to the screen, reminding us that no secret is too deep to be unearthed, and karma arrives right on schedule.